My name is Anna, and I just turned 19 when everything started falling apart. Growing up, I thought my family was pretty normal. It was just me, my younger brother who's 6 years younger than me, and our parents. Dad worked as a manager at my mom's family business, a company my grandfather built from scratch. It started as a small chain of coffee shops and eventually became a big, well-known coffee company. Grandpa was a hard worker, and when he retired, he didn't sell the business. Instead, he offered it to Mom. I remember hearing that conversation. Mom said, "I'm happy being a housewife. Let Paul handle it." So Dad took over, and life continued. It wasn't until I became a teenager that I started noticing problems in our family. Mom and Dad argued more and more. Mom seemed to pick at everything Dad did or didn't do, like she wanted to make him angry. Then, when he finally got upset and raised his voice, she'd act like the victim. She'd cry to anyone who would listen, saying, "I'm just trying to keep this family together," and he yells at me. I didn't know what to think. I loved both my parents, but watching them fight was unbearable. My brother was too young to understand, but I could see the confusion and fear in his eyes whenever they argued. One night, things got really bad. I was in my room, trying to block out their fighting with music, when I heard a loud crash. My heart started racing, and I ran downstairs. What I saw changed everything. Mom was on the floor, screaming that Dad hit her. Dad looked desperate and said, "I didn't touch her, Anna. She fell," and I was trying to help her up. But Mom was already on the phone, calling the police. I stood there, frozen, not knowing who to believe or what to do. That night, when Dad was taken away by the police, is something I'll never forget. I couldn't sleep. My mind was filled with questions. What really happened? Could Dad have hit Mom? Why would Mom lie if he didn't? The next few days were a blur. Dad was released without any charges, and Mom, in what she called an act of kindness, dropped the complaint. But things weren't the same. The tension in the house was unbearable. Mom wouldn't stop talking about how bad Dad was, saying things like, "He's always had a temper, and I've been protecting you and Jack from the worst of it." The divorce happened so quickly, I barely had time to understand. One day, Dad was packing a small suitcase looking lost. "I'm sorry, kids," he said, his voice shaky. "I'll make this right, I promise." But how could he? Mom got everything in the divorce: the house, the car, even Dad's job at the company. He was left with nothing. After Dad left, Mom sat Jack and me down for a talk. "Things will be different now," she said, smiling, but it didn't seem real. "Your father can't hurt us anymore. We're safe." Jack, being young and confused, asked, "When is Dad coming home?" Mom's face changed for a second before she forced a smile again. "Oh, sweetie, Dad needs time to work on himself. But we'll be just fine without him." I had a feeling something wasn't right, but every time I asked Mom about it, she'd shut me down. "You're too young to understand, Anna," she'd say. "Adult relationships are complicated." Then, just 4 months after the divorce, Mom surprised us again. "Kids, I have wonderful news," she announced. "I'm getting married." I was shocked. Married? But it's only been 4 months. Mom cut me off, saying, "When you find true love, you just know." Billy and I, it was love at first sight. I felt sick. How could she move on so fast? What about Dad? What about us? Billy, my new stepdad, moved in soon after. He was okay, I guess. He didn't pay much attention to me, but he and Jack got along well. They'd laugh and play video games together, and I felt even more left out. Meanwhile, Mom took over the family company and brought Billy in to work with her. They were always talking about business and making plans while Jack and I faded into the background. I felt lost, stuck between the family we used to be and this new life I didn't know how to accept. Watching Mom and Billy act all lovey-dovey at the dinner table, with Jack happily chatting away, made me feel like I didn't belong. I couldn't stop wondering where I fit in now and what really happened between Mom and Dad. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, Mom dropped another surprise on us. She and Billy decided to move the company's main office to another city, which they said would be better for business. They were going to transfer all the money to this new part of the company. At first, I didn't think much of it. Sure, moving would be hard, but at least we'd be together, right?
Wrong.
One evening, while I was doing my homework, Mom knocked on my door. Anna, honey, you know Billy and I are moving for work, right? Yeah, when do we leave? I asked, already thinking about packing. Mom's face changed in a way I didn't understand. That's the thing, sweetie. The new house isn't very big, and since you're almost done with high school, we thought it would be better if you stayed here. I felt like I'd been punched. Stay here? What about Jack? Jack's younger. He needs us more, Mom said quickly. Besides, you wouldn't want to switch schools right before your exams, would you? We think it's best if you stay with your grandpa. I couldn't believe it. They were leaving me behind. But Mom, I want to be with you and Jack. Can't we find a bigger place? Mom's tone became firm. Anna, this decision is final. It's for the best. Trust me. And just like that, my world flipped upside down again. Within weeks, Mom, Billy, and Jack were gone, and I moved in with Grandpa. Don't get me wrong, Grandpa is great, but I felt abandoned, like I didn't fit in their new life anymore. Not long after, my 20th birthday came. I foolishly hoped that maybe Mom and Billy would come back for it, but no, they were too busy with work. Grandpa, bless him, threw me a party and let me invite my friends. It wasn't the same, but I appreciated it. The morning after my birthday, Grandpa called me into his office. He looked serious as he handed me a small folder. Happy birthday, Anna, he said with a smile. This is my gift to you, now that you're of age. Confused, I opened the folder and started reading the papers inside. My jaw dropped as I realized what they were. Grandpa, this is... He nodded, smiling. That's right, kiddo. I'm giving you the company. I was stunned. Me, running a whole company at 20? But Grandpa, I don't know anything about running a business, I said. He chuckled. You've got potential, Anna. I see it in you. You'll learn, and I know you'll do great things. Then, he got serious again. There's one more thing. I think you should reconnect with your father. Maybe bring him on as a consultant. He knows the business, and I think there are things you need to hear from him. I hesitated. After everything Mom had told me about Dad, I wasn't sure I wanted to see him. But Grandpa had never led me wrong before. I met Dad at a small cafe downtown. My stomach was in knots as I walked up to the table. Dad stood up, giving me a hesitant smile. He looked older and more tired than I remembered. Anna, he said, his voice warm but careful. I understand you're angry. Your mother probably told you a lot about me. Yeah, she did, I snapped. How you were abusive, how you hit her. How could you, Dad? He took a deep breath. Anna, what your mother told you isn't true. I need you to hear what really happened. For the next hour, Dad told me a story that left me shaken. He explained how Mom had deliberately provoked him, pushing his buttons until he couldn't take it anymore. The night I saw her on the floor, she had staged the whole thing. Your mother took back her police statement in exchange for me giving up everything in the divorce, Dad said, his voice full of pain. She set me up, Anna. She wanted it all, and she got it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But why would Mom do that? Why didn't you fight back? Dad pulled out his phone and played an audio recording. Mom's voice came through, cold and calculating. Paul, here's the deal. You leave quietly, sign everything over to me, and I'll drop the charges. Fight me, and I'll make sure everyone believes you're an abuser. Your choice. I felt sick. Dad, why didn't you use this in court? You could have proven you were innocent. He shook his head sadly. It wouldn't have changed anything, Anna. Your mother had already made up her mind. But more importantly, I didn't want to drag you through any more pain. You were already dealing with so much as a teenager. You needed support, not more family drama. Tears welled up in my eyes. Everything I thought I knew had been a lie. I'm so sorry, Dad. I should have trusted you. Dad reached across the table and squeezed my hand. It's okay, sweetheart. I'm sorry, too. I know I worked too much when you were younger. I should have been there more, Dad said quietly. We sat in silence for a moment, both thinking about everything that had just been said. Then, wiping my eyes, I remembered why I had reached out to him in the first place. Dad, there's something else I need to tell you, I said, my voice shaky but determined.
Grandpa.
He gave me the company for my 20th birthday. Dad's eyes widened in surprise, then softened with pride. Anna, That's incredible. Your grandfather always had a good eye for potential. He must see great things in you. His words filled me with warmth, but I still felt uncertain. But Dad, I don't know anything about running a company. I need help. Without missing a beat, Dad smiled. I'd be honored to help you, free of charge. I'll guide you through everything you need to know. As we continued talking, making plans for the future, I felt a mix of emotions: anger at Mom for her lies, sadness for what our family had lost, but also hope. Maybe, with Dad's help and Grandpa's trust in me, I could turn this unexpected gift into something great. The months flew by, and I settled into my new life with Grandpa. Before I knew it, I was wearing a cap and gown, graduating high school with honors. It felt strange walking across the stage without Mom, Billy, or Jack in the audience, but seeing Grandpa's proud smile and having Dad there made up for it. After graduation, I threw myself into preparing for college. Thanks to my grades and activities, I earned a full scholarship. I decided to major in business management. After all, I had a company to run now. The day I got my acceptance letter, Grandpa insisted we celebrate with some cake and a toast to the future. We were enjoying our second slice when the doorbell rang. Grandpa frowned. "Were you expecting anyone?" I shook my head, just as confused. When Grandpa opened the door, I almost dropped my plate. There stood Mom and Billy, looking like they owned the place. Mom barely glanced at me, her eyes locked on Grandpa, her face angry. "Dad, we need to talk."
Now.
Without waiting to be invited, she marched into the living room, Billy trailing behind. I stood there, stunned, as she turned on Grandpa. "Why can't I access the company accounts?" she demanded. "And who gave you the right to block the capital transfer to our new subsidiary?" Grandpa stood tall, his voice calm but firm. "Jessica, the company no longer belongs to you. It's Anna's now." Mom's jaw dropped, and for a moment, she looked completely shocked. Then her eyes narrowed as she glanced between Grandpa and me. "What do you mean it's Anna's?" she hissed. "Exactly what I said," Grandpa replied. "The company is Anna's now." "I gave Anna the company for her 20th birthday," Grandpa said firmly. "All decisions about its future and finances are hers to make now." Mom's shocked expression quickly turned into a fake, sweet smile as she looked at me. "Anna, sweetie, I've missed you so much. Why don't you come live with us? We've settled in so well in the new city." I blinked, surprised by her sudden change in tone. "We have a lovely house," she continued, her voice sugary. "There's a big bedroom just for you, with plenty of space for a desk and computer. You could study and work from home. Wouldn't that be nice?" For a moment, I felt a tug in my heart. A part of me, the part that still craved my mom's approval, wanted to say yes. But then I remembered everything I had learned and everything I had built here. "Thanks, Mom, but no," I replied, surprised at how steady my voice was. "I'm happy here. I have my friends, my life, and Grandpa. Plus, I'm starting college soon." The tension in the room was thick as I stood my ground. Mom's sweetness quickly disappeared when she realized I wasn't going to be swayed. "Fine," she snapped, her voice cold now. "If you won't come to us, we'll move back here. We can all live in our old house, just like before. Wouldn't that be nice, Anna?" I shook my head, feeling a mix of sadness and determination. "No, Mom, that's not going to happen either." I could see the anger building in her eyes, her fake calm starting to crumble. This was my chance. "Mom," I said, my voice steady even though my heart was racing, "I want you to tell me the truth. What really happened between you and Dad? Why did you get divorced?" For a moment, confusion flickered across her face. Then, right on cue, tears welled up in her eyes. "Oh, Anna," she sobbed, "your father was so cruel. He insulted me, and he even hit me. I had to leave to protect myself. To protect you and Jack." A surge of anger rushed through me. "Stop it, Mom," I said firmly. "I know what really happened. I know you set Dad up. You framed him so you could divorce him and take everything." The tears vanished from Mom's face in an instant, replaced by a cold, furious look I'd never seen before. "How dare you?" she hissed. "You ungrateful child. You have no right to meddle in my personal life." She turned to Grandpa, her voice rising. Everything here belongs to me. I decide who lives where and who gets what, Mom snapped, turning toward me again. You will come home right now, Anna, and you will hand over that company to me, where it belongs. I stood there, shocked by the harshness in her voice. Grandpa stepped forward, his face full of disappointment and anger. That's enough, Jessica, he said, his voice calm but strong. You seem to have forgotten a few important things. This property, including your old house, belongs to me, not you. And the company now belongs to Anna. I gave it to her, and it's hers to manage as she sees fit. Mom's face turned pale, then red with anger. She opened her mouth to argue, but Grandpa cut her off. I've heard enough, he said firmly. I'm ashamed of you, Jessica. I raised you better than this. Now, I think it's time for you and Billy to leave. You can't kick us out. Mom screamed. I'm your daughters. Grandpa's expression was unshaken. And Anna is my granddaughter, a granddaughter who has shown more strength and integrity in the past few months than you have in years. Now leave, both of you. I watched as a storm of emotions swirled inside me while Grandpa led Mom and Billy to the door. Mom's face was full of anger and disbelief as they left. When the sound of their car driving away faded, I sank onto the couch, feeling drained. Grandpa sat beside me, wrapping a comforting arm around my shoulders. As we sat in silence, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. The confrontation with Mom had been intense, but I knew it wasn't over. This was just the beginning of a new chapter in our complicated family story. The next morning, I woke to the sound of quiet voices downstairs. Curious, I crept down to find Grandpa and Dad deep in conversation in the study. Anna, Dad said when he saw me. Come in, sweetheart. We were just talking about you and Jack. I walked into the room, confused. What about Jack? I asked. Grandpa cleared his throat. I've asked your father if he'd consider seeking custody of Jack. My eyes widened. Really? But how? Dad nodded, determination and hope in his eyes. Your grandfather thinks we have a strong case, especially with what he's found out. Grandpa reached for a thick folder on his desk. Anna, sit down. There's something you need to see. I opened the folder, and inside was a detailed report from a private investigator. As I read it, my world turned upside down again. Mom was cheating on you, I said, looking at Dad, horrified. With Billy. For years. Dad nodded grimly. It seems so. Grandpa pointed to several documents, hotel receipts, gift records, old text messages. Your mother and Billy were having an affair long before the divorce. But how did the investigator find all this? I asked, confused. Grandpa's eyes narrowed. Billy made a big mistake. He threw away his old phone when he bought a new one. Our investigator was able to recover it, and it was full of information. I felt sick. But why go through all the drama with the divorce? Why accuse Dad of abuse? That was Billy's idea, Grandpa said, his voice heavy. According to their texts on that old phone, he suggested she frame your father for domestic violence. It was all a plan to make sure she got everything in the divorce. Tears filled my eyes, but Grandpa wasn't done. There's more, he said, flipping to another part of the report. That phone also revealed Billy's true identity. He's not who he claims to be. He's a con man, Anna. The phone had messages with other women. He targets wealthy women, marries them, and then disappears with their money. Suddenly, everything made sense. That's why he wanted to move the company and transfer all the money. I gasped. He was planning to steal it. Grandpa nodded seriously. Exactly. And I've already confronted your mother with this evidence, but she refuses to believe it. She's in complete denial about who Billy really is and what he plans to do. I sat back, my head spinning. What do we do now? We fight, Dad said firmly. For Jack, for the company, for the truth. Grandpa nodded. I've already contacted my lawyer. We're going to file for custody of Jack and take steps to protect the company. The next few months were a blur of legal battles and emotional stress. Dad fought hard for custody of Jack, and I stood by him, determined to bring my little brother home. The courtroom was tense as Mom tried to make Dad look like a monster, telling lies about abuse and neglect. But her stories fell apart under the weight of all the evidence we had. The judge listened carefully as our lawyer presented everything: the investigators' findings, the recovered phone messages, proof of Mom's affair, and the whole plan she and Billy had to frame Dad. I'll never forget the look on Mom's face when the judge gave full custody to Dad. It was a mix of shock, anger, and maybe a hint of realization that her world was falling apart. The final blow came soon after. When Billy found out that Mom had lost the company, the house, and had child support payments, he showed his true colors. He disappeared overnight, running off with another woman, leaving Mom with nothing but the mess she had created. In a desperate attempt, Mom tried to make up with Dad. I was there when she came to our house, tears streaming down her face, begging for forgiveness. But Dad stood firm. "I'm sorry, Jessica," he said, his voice steady. "Too much has happened. I can't trust you again. Please leave." As the door closed behind her, I felt like a chapter in our lives had ended. It was painful, but also oddly freeing. Life started to settle into a new routine after that. I focused on my college studies, determined to learn everything I could about business management. Between classes, I'd go over company reports with Dad, soaking up his knowledge and experience. He agreed to run the company until I graduated, giving me time to learn without the pressure of full responsibility. Jack, still too young to fully understand everything, thrived under Dad's care. It was heartwarming to see their relationship grow. Jack's face would light up when Dad came home from work, and we'd all play board games together on Sunday nights. We often visited Grandpa, who lived just a few blocks away, and Wednesday dinners became a special tradition. The four of us would gather around Grandpa's big oak table, sharing stories and laughter. Grandpa would tell us tales from his early days building the company, his eyes sparkling as I listened to every word. As I sit here now in my childhood bedroom, which feels like home again, I can't help but think about how much has changed. The path to this point was tough, full of betrayals and hard truths, but it also brought us here a family rebuilt, stronger and closer than ever. I know there will be challenges ahead. Running a company is no easy task, and the echoes of our family drama may linger for years. But I'm not afraid. With Dad, Jack, and Grandpa by my side, I feel ready for whatever the future brings.
Did you steal a junior's patent just because you're a high school grad and you're jealous? That's disgraceful for a mentor. I incorporated technology I learned at Harvard to develop this. Why would you do something so terrible? I was summoned by manager David and James, and they accused me of something I had no recollection of. I never once stole someone's patent. On the other hand, James has been slacking off at work and hasn't developed anything worthy of a patent. If that's the case, I'll resign. Thank you for everything. They must have been thrilled, thinking they finally got their hands on the coveted patent. But this isn't going to be so easy. The next day, President Beck persistently calls me. "Hello." "Hey, Mike, what do you mean you're resigning?" It's no wonder he's calling me in a panic. He knows what kind of impact my resignation will have. I'm Mike Williams, 42 years old. I live with my wife and our only son, who just started middle school, while working in the development department at Beck Holdings. This company sells a wide range of daily goods and furniture, and has recently been focusing on handling caregiving products. The reason is that as the company's workforce ages, the demand for caregiving products is increasing. So, the development department has been diligently working on developing these products every day. Although I didn't go to college, I've been working at this company ever since I graduated from high school. Because of this, I have a deep understanding of the company's operations, and am often appointed as a mentor for new employees. While teaching various new employees, I believe I've earned the trust of many of them. Therefore, building relationships with new employees is one of the joys of my job. However, this time, the new employee I'm in charge of is not easy to deal with.
"James."
"What is it?" The person who responded in a lackluster voice was James Smith. He looks a bit older because he often slacks off, but he is a fresh graduate starting work this year. "I told you to get this job done." "Yeah, Can't you do it, Mike? He says he's busy, but he's just finishing the bare minimum and then slacking off the rest of the time. I tell him, who is acting nonchalant. I don't want to say this, but if you keep deliberately slacking off, HR will take action against you. The company can't easily fire people, so it's fine. Maybe a high school grad like you wouldn't understand that. He's a cunning guy in situations like this. Seeing him completely unashamed, I couldn't help but sigh. The truth is, James is a Harvard grad. That might be why he has such an arrogant attitude toward me. A high school grad who joined this company. I once talked to our development department manager, David, about James's attitude. However, no matter how many times I consulted him, he wouldn't take me seriously because I'm a high school grad. He's just started. This is normal for now. Yes, he's a new hire, but even considering that, this is too much. With a high school grad as his mentor, no wonder he doesn't listen. Maybe you should ask HR to change the mentor. Beck Holdings does hire high school graduates. But some employees look down on high school grads, and manager David is one of them. So, he was no help at all, and I often had to solve problems on my own if anything troublesome came up. Well, do your best. If you want to change mentors, go ask yourself. I'll leave it to you. Understood. Even after consulting him, manager David completely ignored me and walked away. Should I ask to change mentors? While pondering this, I continued with my development work. I am in charge of developing the company's prioritized bathing aid equipment for caregiving. This equipment is based on ideas that came to me while helping care for my grandparents. It's designed to make the heavy task of bathing assistance easier, and I've already patented the mechanism. Since it significantly reduces the burden on both the elderly and caregivers. We've already secured orders for 1,000 units for care facilities across the US. Although the manufacturing for the current orders is complete, I'm working on fine-tuning the design for future improvements. Suddenly, James calls out to me. Hey, what are you working on? James, this is bathing aid equipment. For caregiving. Yeah, the demand for caregiving products is rapidly increasing. Our company is focusing on this sector too. James, for once, seemed interested in my work. For the first time, I felt like I was doing my job as his mentor. How does it work? This is how. Hoping this would be his first step towards taking work seriously, I explained how to use it. When he saw the platform move with the press of a button, James looked impressed. This makes bathing assistance easier. It's been extremely well received in the field. It's really convenient. This is going to sell well. Yeah, other companies haven't offered anything like this yet. That's why we've already secured deals with many care facilities. I see. Listening to my explanation, James gave a sly smile. He seemed impressed at first, but then his smile turned unsettling. I wondered if he was planning something, but brushed off the thought. Anyway, let's get back to work, James. Can you take care of? I'm too busy for that, seriously. After my usual interaction with James, I finished my work. A week passed without incident. Then, I was called to the meeting room by manager David. When I arrived, not only was manager David there, but James was also smiling smugly, giving me a bad feeling. Wondering what they were up to, I asked. Is something wrong? Manager David said something unbelievable. Did you steal a junior's patent just because you're a high school grad and jealous? That's disgraceful for a mentor. I incorporated technology I learned at Harvard to develop this. Why would you do something so terrible? What are you talking about? They summoned me just to make this baseless accusation. Beck Holdings encourages its employees to develop new ideas, allowing them to patent their innovations under their own names. I had applied for patents myself, but I have never stolen anyone's patent. On the other hand, James has been slacking off and hasn't developed anything worthy of a patent. James hasn't developed anything worthy of a patent. See, this is what he says, manager. I finished that caregiving equipment. It's useless to feign ignorance now. There's no way you could have completed that caregiving equipment. Caregiving equipment, you say? It seems they're talking about the bathing aid equipment. Then, I understood their intent. A week ago, James saw my development. He realized that this invention was groundbreaking and would generate significant profit. If he could get the patent under his name, he could make a lot of money from the royalties. That's why the two of them are trying to take the patent from me. Manager David, you know I've been working on that equipment all along.
Right.
But recently, hasn't he been advancing it? That's right. My unreliable high school grad mentor was struggling with the development, so I, a Harvard grad, helped him out. James chuckled. There's no truth to this, but somehow the story is that he took over my development. Isn't that right? In that case, shouldn't the rights to the development belong to James? He handled the crucial parts of this project. It's not right for you to take credit. You say that, but James had nothing to do with this development. I led this project and managed all its progress. James didn't contribute at all. I argue desperately. Then, James speaks arrogantly. You're being pathetic, senpai. I used my Harvard education to bring this to completion, and you want to ignore that.
Isn't that dishonest?
This caregiving equipment will become one of our main products. This patent will be valuable for many companies' development. I understand why you want it, but taking it from me is unacceptable. The person who developed it should reap the benefits. Who's trying to steal the patent here? I spent a lot of time developing this, and you're the ones trying to take it under false pretenses. You're the ones being unreasonable. Do I have to spell it out? We're telling you to hand over your patent. It seems all this back and forth was just a prelude to taking the patent from me by force. Seeing that I wouldn't back down, they started being direct. Why should I have to do that? It's a waste to let a high school grad keep that patent. You should stick to simple tasks. Manager David sneered at me, and James added insult to injury. From now on, I'll apply for the patent on that equipment. Then, the royalties from the technology used in that equipment will be mine. I won't give you, who always criticized me, a single cent. I don't recall ever criticizing you. If you want it, here's what you need. James said, making a circle with his fingers. Seeing his vulgar gesture made me feel disgusted. It seems they're saying that if I want the patent back, I have to pay. They're trying to extort money from me in exchange for the patent. If you pay me, I'll give you back the rights to this patent. But then again, a high school grad might not even know how to file a patent application. While you figure it out, we might just go ahead and file it ourselves. Haha. I created this bathing aid equipment to make the increasingly tough caregiving environment a bit easier. That's why many care facilities have already signed contracts, and a large number of units are set for delivery. The technology I developed will be crucial in manufacturing many future products. I never thought my development would be trampled on by having the patent stolen. If they are determined to do this, I have my own plans. I've always felt dissatisfied working in this development department. James, a new hire, is trying to steal my patent, and Manager David dismisses every consultation I make. Now, they've teamed up to take the patent from me. I can't work at a company where employees dedicated to development are so mistreated just because they're high school grads. If that's the case, I'll resign. Thank you for everything. They didn't expect me to actually quit, and they were surprised. Then they started laughing. So, you're taking responsibility for stealing the patent by resigning. You finally get it. Well, thank you for everything up till now. They must be thrilled, thinking they've finally gotten their hands on the coveted patent. But it's not going to be that simple. They'll soon regret making me resign. The next day, I was relaxing at home. I knew the phone would ring about the patent. Sure enough, before noon, my phone started ringing non-stop. The caller ID showed that it was President Beck of Beck Holdings, persistently calling me. I had been ignoring the calls, but since it kept ringing, I decided to answer. Hello. Hey Mike, what do you mean you're resigning? It's no wonder he's calling me in a panic. He understands the consequences of my resignation. If you resign, what will happen to the patents used in that equipment? He then told me what had happened at the company after I resigned. Yesterday, after I left, James brought the patent application documents to President Beck. Taking the documents, President Beck was suspicious. What is this patent application? I finished that caregiving equipment, so I thought I'd apply for the patent. At Beck Holdings, employees can apply for patents through the company for inventions they develop individually. In return, the company can use the technology without paying royalties as long as the employee remains employed. That's the company policy. The mechanism of that caregiving equipment is certainly innovative. Right, there's no doubt the patent will be granted if we apply. James spoke confidently. It's fine. Since this company has been good to me, I'll set the royalty fee at 1% of sales. Don't be ridiculous. Excuse me. President Beck told James, who was speaking boastfully without understanding the company policy. Mike has already applied for and received approval for this patent. What Mike? Senpai did. He's already applied for the patent. Hearing President Beck's words, they both panicked. They underestimated me because I'm a high school grad. They never thought I had already applied for the patent. Their plan to oust me and steal the patent was now easily thwarted. It would have been better if they had backed down here. But James couldn't let it go and started to plead. No, that's not right. I finished that caregiving equipment. You finished it? I integrated technology I learned at Harvard to create this caregiving equipment. That's why it's such an innovative product. But Mike Senpai took all the credit. James spoke proudly. But the more he talked, the deeper the frown on President Beck's face grew. James. He doesn't get any recognition because he's just a high school grad. This project has been in development for 5 years. 5 years. Hearing President Beck's words, James turned pale. Wasn't this project started a few months ago? Do you really think that? You're part of the development department, yet you underestimate the development process. Glaring at James, President Beck continued. Product development is not that simple. For this caregiving equipment, I conducted numerous interviews at facilities. Based on that, I meticulously repeated prototypes and considered market trends to complete it. That's why the development took so much time. 5 years ago, you hadn't even joined our company, let alone entered college. So how could you have used the technology you learned at Harvard? Well, that is. It's clear that Mike is the leader of this development. Do you still claim you have patent rights? Under President Beck's questioning, James began to sweat profusely. His plan to steal the patent and profit from it had completely backfired. Then, as if to blame Manager David for this situation, James started complaining. Wait, Manager David, you didn't tell me about this. I didn't know either. Manager. It seems Manager David wasn't aware that I had applied for the patent. He had always dismissed me because I was a high school grad. Now, he was facing the consequences of that attitude. Sensing something was off from their conversation, President Beck asked, Where is Mike? Well, James and Manager David exchanged glances, and then James answered, He resigned. What? President Beck immediately understood the gravity of the situation and was shocked. Unlike before, he now appeared very anxious. Why did that happen? Well, that is. Without him, we can't use the patent for that caregiving equipment. We won't be able to deliver the 1,000 units already ordered. 1,000 units? If I don't return, they won't be able to deliver those 1,000 units. They can't sell products using the patent without permission. The sales department worked hard to secure those contracts. and the high demand for products that ease bathing assistance led many care facilities to place orders. I didn't know either. The delivery is in just 2 weeks. Without him, we can't sell the products that use this patent.
That is.
Maybe we could sell them without anyone noticing. Manager David's murmured comment enraged President Beck.
Absolutely not.
Selling products that infringe on a patent is out of the question. We'd not only get sued for patent infringement, but we'd also lose the trust of our clients. What have you been doing in the development department all these years? Disregarding the importance of patents only made President Beck angrier. Anyone who's worked in development for decades should understand the significance of intellectual property. Enough. You two are dismissed.
Yes.
Understood. That's why President Beck reached out to me, desperate to secure the patent rights. If you resign, we'll be in big trouble. The technology used in the caregiving equipment will become unusable, yes. If you understand that, then why? Because they tried to steal my patent just because I'm a high school grad. I decided I can't work at a company like this anymore. I had repeatedly asked Manager David to do something about James. However, because I was just a high school grad, they never took me seriously. I can no longer stay at a company where someone like that is a manager. I'm sorry, but I have no intention of returning. My resignation has already been accepted. Right. Goodbye. Mike. I knew they'd be in trouble without me. But I was furious with those two for trying to steal the credit for my 5 years of work. I didn't care if the product couldn't be delivered. I hung up the phone. Later, Manager David called, probably after hearing from President Beck. Hey, you, why didn't you tell me you already applied for the patent?
It's a bit late for that.
Of course, I had reported the patent application to him as my supervisor. But he probably didn't listen because I was just a high school grad. That's why he forgot I had applied for the patent related to the caregiving equipment. Weren't you going to apply for the patent? Go ahead, do as you please. Damn it, you knew this would happen if you resigned, didn't you? Yes. It was obvious they'd be in trouble without the patent rights if I left. But this happened because Manager David and the others tried to steal the credit for my development. If they had just been lazy, it would have been one thing, but trying to steal the patent was despicable. Listen seriously, if this continues, our company will be in serious trouble. We might even go bankrupt if we lose trust. So what? You. Hearing my indifferent response made Manager David even angrier. But I had no intention of helping him out of his predicament. You were the ones who never listened to me. I had repeatedly consulted him about James's behavior and asserted that I developed the caregiving equipment, but they never acknowledged it. Just come back. If you don't, we won't be able to make the delivery. The delivery is in 2 weeks. It's too late to change the schedule now. Moreover, it would be difficult to remake the products without using the patent. They have no choice but to bring me back. Manager David shouted furiously. We'll proceed with the delivery. Is that fine with you? I doubt the president would force the delivery, but if you do, I'll sue for patent infringement. You're taking advantage of the situation. Goodbye. I didn't see any point in continuing the conversation, so I hung up. Later, probably pressured by Manager David and President Beck, James called me too. Don't mess with me. If you'd already applied for the patent, why didn't you say so? Why should I have to tell you? It was exasperating to hear the same thing from him. They underestimated me because I'm a high school grad, assuming I wouldn't have the knowledge to apply for a patent. That's why they thought they could easily claim the patent under their names. However, I've been working in the development department of this company for a long time. Of course, I understood the employment regulations regarding patent applications. You tried to steal the work I've been developing all along, even though you haven't done any work at all. I'm a Harvard grad, of course. I'm superior to you. A high school grad, you should just hand over the credit. Sure, Education is important, but it's not everything in the real world. His irrational thinking explained why he kept slacking off, and I sighed in exasperation. In any case, it didn't matter to me anymore since I had already quit. If you say the development is yours, go ahead and apply for the patent again. So, there's no problem without me, right?
Well, that's...
With a talented Harvard grad like you, the work should be fine. Good luck. Hey. With that, I hung up the phone. I hoped that would be the end of it, but of course it wasn't. When the delivery date was just a week away, the products were already manufactured. If they need to apologize to the clients, they need to act now. But cancelling the delivery at this point is not realistic. It should be considered a last resort if all else fails. So, I was called back to Beck Holdings once again. Initially, I had no intention of coming. However, President Beck had given me a chance by hiring me, a high school grad, and I felt indebted to him. So, after cooling off, I didn't want to cause him any more trouble. I'm truly sorry, Mike.
We're sorry.
We deeply apologize. I was surprised that they genuinely apologized. It seems they finally understood the gravity of the situation. President Beck must have given them a stern talking to. No problem, so what happened after that? Nothing has changed since then. It's impossible to remake the products now, and going around apologizing to the clients for the non-delivery is. In any case, Beck Holdings' reputation would inevitably plummet if this continues. It could even lead to bankruptcy. The three of them were anxious about how to get permission to use the patent. President Beck sighed deeply. I understand why you're angry. James and manager David will be fired, so could you please come back?
What? What do you mean, President?
The two of them burst into anger. It seems they hadn't been informed about their termination. Given their mistakes, being fired is justified, but they were still shouting in protest. We weren't told about this. We've contributed so much. How can you say that? This decision is final. President Beck began speaking, visibly frustrated. James, I've heard about your usual behavior. Usual behavior? James's voice trembled as he repeated the words, seemingly aware of his actions. Yes, I wanted to give you some time since you're a new hire. But you've been flaunting your Harvard degree and slacking off at work. James barely completed the minimum tasks and then shirked his responsibilities. Being a new hire and a Harvard grad, he was initially overlooked, but his behavior was almost tantamount to theft. Many employees reported their dissatisfaction with him. And now, trying to steal a patent. Slacking off could have been addressed with guidance. However, plotting to steal a patent and forcing me to resign, resulting in the inability to deliver 1,000 units, was a serious issue. James's actions caused significant damage to the company's operations, and President Beck could no longer ignore his behavior. He then turned to Manager David. Manager David, you're also at fault. I've heard there have been significant issues with your work attitude as well.
That's not true.
You've also been stealing credit from your subordinates and irresponsibly neglecting them. It seems the other employees in the development department felt the same way I did. Even when reports were made about James, Manager David did nothing. On the contrary, he colluded with James to steal the patent. Such a manager deserves to be punished. We cannot keep such individuals in our company. Suddenly, Manager David pointed at James and began to accuse him.
It's all his fault.
What? If he hadn't lured me into this, I wouldn't have. James was shocked, clearly not expecting Manager David to shift the blame onto him. It seems Manager David chose to betray James to save himself. He took 4 years off to get into Harvard and wanted to make money to prove himself to his family. Don't say that. While James did graduate from Harvard, it turns out he had a rather complicated background. Spending 4 years trying to get into Harvard must have caused his family a lot of trouble. That's probably why he plotted this scheme to prove himself to them. Still, being 26 as a new graduate explains
Why he looks older?
James, not backing down, counterattacked.
Well, Manager David, you spent too much money on women, and now you're about to be kicked out of your house.
Hey, apparently, Manager David had been indulging in affairs, depleting his family's savings. To make up for it, he needed money, which led him to gamble on stealing the patent for a quick fortune. Watching them argue so disgracefully over such selfish motives, I couldn't help but feel disgusted. They kept blaming each other so much that I finally spoke up. In any case, do you two realize what you've done?
Well,
Seeing how furious I was, they trembled in fear. Then, I told them what I had wanted to say all along. Do you understand how it feels to have something you've spent 5 years developing, through countless hardships, stolen from you? I spent years turning my ideas into reality. Of course, it wasn't always smooth, which is why it took years. Frankly, this development was extremely challenging. When James joined the company, most of the work was already done, so neither of you can truly understand my struggles. To bring this product to life, I used all the technical skills of the development department. This patent is the culmination of all that hard work. They don't understand that stealing it is an insult to every developer. Get out! Please wait, Mike-senpai. I'll work hard from now on. I'll listen to you from now on. Just don't fire me. I won't grant permission to use the patent unless you both are fired.
accepted.
My resolve was firm, and nothing they said could change my mind. They had treated me so poorly that their dismissal was inevitable. Though they cried and pleaded, President Beck ultimately fired them. James and Manager David continued to argue bitterly until the end. However, no amount of arguing could reverse their dismissal. From that day forward, they were fired and never returned to work. James had taken 4 years to get into Harvard, causing significant trouble for his family. While it would have been fine if he had worked properly, he was swiftly fired from Beck Holdings, the company he joined after graduating from Harvard. His family, fed up with his failures, disowned him. He then tried to find another job, but no decent company would hire a 26-year-old with a history of dismissal, despite his Harvard degree. Unable to find another job, he struggled with living expenses and ended up working part-time at a corner shop. As for Manager David, or rather just David now, his wife discovered that he had been squandering their savings on affairs. That money had been saved for their retirement, and his wife was furious. She divorced him and demanded repayment of the money he had used. David had very little savings of his own, making it difficult to repay the amount in one lump sum. As a result, David had to pay his wife a fixed amount each month. He tried to find a new job to support himself and make the payments, but he was no longer at an age where re-employment was easy. He started working part-time at night construction, struggling to make ends meet. After that, my resignation was revoked, and I returned to work at Beck Holdings. The patent rights were restored, and the bathing aid equipment I developed was successfully delivered. It is already being used in care facilities, where its convenience is appreciated by many caregivers and residents. I'm really glad you stayed with us, President Beck said. I owe a lot to you, President Beck. I had resigned in a fit of anger over what those two did. However, I am grateful to this company for hiring me, a high school graduate. So, I decided to let bygones be bygones and hope to work here until retirement. I also wanted to continue developing products that would delight our clients.
He can be replaced anytime. Chris had used me, looked down on me, and scolded me. My pride was in shambles. But one day, a turning point came, and my situation changed. Starting today, I've been appointed the new CEO. What? Chris, the manager who always looked down on me, boasted about becoming the next CEO and strutted around arrogantly, unlike me, who quietly did my job. But his time was running out. Soon, I'll bring him back to reality. So completely that he won't be able to recover. I'll make him regret all the suffering he's caused me. I am Jack Moore, a single, dedicated businessman. Working for a local company, Suns Corporation, I lead a busy life. Since joining the company, I've worked diligently without complaining, and now I'm in my mid-40s. With more young employees joining and getting promoted one after another. I paid no attention to promotions and just focused on my work. Some people ask if I have any hobbies outside of work, but to me, work is like a hobby. A workaholic. I've been called that, but I take it as a compliment. Colleagues, subordinates, and even bosses often rely on me if they have any issues. Whether it's work problems or interpersonal relationships, I believe it's my job to listen and guide them to solutions. Creating a better work environment for everyone is also important. I'm not exactly a behind-the-scenes hero, but if it's for the company, I'm satisfied with that. One day, a man named Chris came from the headquarters. I'm Chris, the manager who will soon become this company's president. Things won't be the same now that I'm here. Prepare to be driven hard. Chris, who is a decade younger than me, is already a manager. It seems the company has high expectations for him. Maybe that's why he can even claim he'll become the president. Listen to the future president's orders properly, otherwise, I'll put you on the fast track to being laid off. Unlike me, he has momentum and a strong presence that pulls everyone along. However, his attitude and words feel completely off. But my work doesn't change. I'll just keep doing the tasks given to me, as always. But Chris didn't approve of that. Hey old man, is this all you can do? Just things anyone could do? No, I'm just doing my job. How is that a job? Even a kid could do that. You're no better than a salary thief. He made snide remarks about my work. It was the first time anyone had said such things to me, and I couldn't help but pause. Look around. Everyone here is younger than you and eager for promotions. When there's someone who can't do the job, it kills everyone's motivation. Just get out of here. Why did he have to say so much on our first meeting? I was just doing my job as usual. Chris would also loudly mock me whenever he had the chance. He called me incompetent, a hindrance, and unnecessary for the company. It was no longer just snide remarks, but outright abuse. Other employees avoided making eye contact with Chris, fearing they'd become his next target. Everyone must have thought the same thing. An awful man had joined the team. From that day on, Chris constantly belittled and reprimanded me. Oh, it stinks in here. This department reeks of old man smell. It's unbearable. No wonder no one can concentrate on work. This kind of task should have been finished yesterday. Stop making me so angry. If you can't do your job properly, we don't need you here. Pack up and get out. Since Chris's arrival, this kind of abuse happened daily, and a dark shadow began to fall over my heart. Even my co-workers started looking at me with disdain. I just took it all without saying anything back. The juniors who looked up to me, my colleagues, and even my boss, all nodded at Chris's words and gave me cold looks. I became afraid to make eye contact with anyone, and everyone at the company became a source of fear. I grew paranoid, wondering if they were bad-mouthing me behind my back. Before I knew it, I couldn't even walk in front of people anymore, and I started to distance myself from others. Naturally, this affected my work, and mistakes piled up. Chris took every opportunity to reprimand me. Each time, my heart would race and sweat would pour from my forehead. Don't spill your filth and dirty the company. At this point, you're just a piece of junk. He said this with a laugh, and I could hear others snickering too. Chris claimed he would train me to be competent and dumped a massive workload on me. While everyone else left on time, I was the only one working late. By the time I finally finished and left the office, it was past 9 p.m. On my usual way home, I passed by a small park that I usually just walked past. This time, I felt drawn to a bench and sat down. With a deep sigh, tears began to flow. At that moment, An elderly man approached me. "You okay? At this hour, anyone in the park must be homeless." I wanted to be alone. I was about to hand him some money to make him leave, but instead, the old man sat beside me and offered me a handkerchief. The handkerchief was well worn and had holes in it. "Thank you." I wiped my tears with the handkerchief. I thought he would ask what happened, but he just sat there quietly, watching the scenery with me. Then he slowly stood up. "I'm meeting my wife now. See you again," he said and walked away. Clutching the old man's handkerchief, I headed home. My apartment is about a 30-minute walk from the company. When I got to my apartment, I thought about the old man. He seemed to be in his 70s, with white hair, a gentle demeanor, and a kind voice. He was very calm and composed. Who could he be? Looking at the handkerchief, there was nothing to reveal anything about the old man. "I wonder if I'll see him again," I muttered to myself. A month passed, and I started meeting the old man regularly. At the same time and in the same park as before. I thought it would be rude to ask too many personal questions, so I didn't. The old man, named Charles Anderson, was in his 70s and still working, though not in a traditional office setting. It must be tough for someone in their 70s to work physically demanding jobs. Health is the most important thing, after all. Health is important, but I never thought it was tough. I love my current job. Seeing Mr. Anderson talk so happily made me look down involuntarily. "Do you dislike your job?" "I like it, but right now, I hate it." I told Mr. Anderson about everything that had happened to me. I told him how I've always been the most dedicated to my work, that this company is very important to me, and I want to repay it through my work. But when my boss Chris arrived, all my efforts seemed meaningless. Every word he said made me feel more frustrated, and I was on the verge of tears. Mr. Anderson, who had been listening silently, slowly began to speak. "I can deeply understand your feelings, your passion and sincerity for your work, and your love for the company. For the past month, Chris had been dumping a massive amount of work on me under the guise of training. As a result, working on weekends and overtime became the norm." Mr. Anderson continued speaking to me as I looked down. "He's a terrible boss. I've worked hard up until now, but it's time to end it. Are you quitting?" I didn't respond to Mr. Anderson's question. I checked the time on my watch. "I should be going. I'm sorry for burdening you with my troubles." "It's a shame. I think you're indispensable to the company." Mr. Anderson's words made me feel momentarily confused. "I'm not that kind of person," I muttered softly and left. When I got to my apartment, I plopped down on the sofa. I remembered Mr. Anderson's words. "I'm not that kind of person." I sat up and placed a piece of paper on the table. It was my resignation letter. I had written it a week after Chris arrived. At the time, I never thought I would actually submit it. But now things were different. I had made up my mind to quit. If Chris hadn't come, this wouldn't be happening. The next day, my resignation letter was in my bag. It was my last day at work. "Good morning, manager. Do you have a moment? I need to talk to you." "What is it? Are you quitting?" Chris responded nonchalantly. "Is that so? Finally made up your mind? I've been eagerly waiting for you to leave." He extended his hand with a big grin, urging me to hand over the resignation letter, as I pulled the letter from my bag. "There are plenty of replacements for incompetents like you," Chris said. Hearing his words, a surge of anger welled up from deep within me. Who does he think caused all this? I clenched my fist tightly. I will never forgive him. At least one punch to this man's face. At that moment, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. "Hey, it's annoying." I stepped into the hallway to answer the call and was shocked to find out who was on the other end. The person on the phone asked me to come to a certain place immediately. "Right now, but..." I hesitated and turned around to find Chris behind me. "You're not part of this company anymore. Get lost." If I stayed any longer and he said anything more, I might really lose control. "Thank you for everything." As I left those words behind, I left the company. I headed straight to the meeting place mentioned on the call. It was the small park. Not here yet. I sat on the usual bench and closed my eyes. Everything that had happened so far flashed through my mind. I had just left the company I worked for so long. No regrets. I kept telling myself this was for the best. You don't look like someone who just quit. Are you having second thoughts? Mr. Anderson. I was supposed to arrive earlier, but I needed some time to prepare. The person on the phone was Mr. Anderson. I just got here too, but Mr. Anderson, what's with the outfit? This. Mr. Anderson was dressed in a high-end suit, looking like a completely different person. I didn't mean to surprise you, but I thought it was necessary for your sake. I couldn't understand what he meant, and then Mr. Anderson said something unbelievable. It left me speechless. The next day, even though I had just quit my job, I found myself heading back to the company. Normally, this would be ridiculous. But this wasn't a normal situation. I had no idea what was going to happen next. When I arrived at the company, got out of the car and walked inside, the employees looked at me with surprise and started whispering. Then my nemesis, Chris, arrived at work. What? Jack. Good morning. What are you doing here? You quit, so get lost. Just seeing Chris made my body tense up. I'm sorry, but it's you who should be leaving. What did you say? Mr. Anderson, who was behind me, interjected sharply. I saw you earlier talking to the receptionist. This isn't the place for that. You seem to think this is a bar or something. What did you say, you? Chris, showing his anger, stormed toward Mr. Anderson with a furious expression. Seeing this, I hurriedly stepped between them. Please stop. You useless idiot. Stay out of my way. Chris shifted his target to me and grabbed my collar tightly. Don't get cocky, you. At that moment, he noticed the suit I was wearing, and his expression changed. Why are you wearing such a high-end luxury suit? A president should dress appropriately, and your way of speaking is far from commendable. What, president? Mr. Anderson looked at me and nodded deeply. Effective today, he's been appointed the new president. What? Didn't you hear? This is the new president of the company, Mr. Jack Moore. Chris seemed unable to comprehend what was happening. It was understandable. The subordinate he looked down on just yesterday was now standing before him as the president. You've got to be kidding. Why is someone like him the new president? I'm the one who deserves to be president. The fact that you're claiming to be suitable for the role reveals your true character. What did you say? Oh, did I hurt that high pride of yours? I haven't said anything wrong. Chris's face turned bright red. Mr. Anderson, let's stop here. And Manager Chris. Jack, you. Wake up already. Your arrogant attitude and words are driving people away and causing significant losses to the company. Losses? Why would I be responsible for that? Recently, the company's performance had been declining. And it started when Chris arrived. Why did this happen? The reason is simple. Chris looked down on everyone and treated them like they were beneath him. He acted as if he were the most important person. The employees who worked in that environment grew to despise it, which lowered their motivation. As a result, the company's profits gradually declined. Well, even if I didn't. As a manager, it's your responsibility to keep track of the company's profits daily. Not doing so is inexcusable. It's equivalent to abandoning your duties. I'm not at fault. It's all those incompetent people. He's the typical example of someone who can't see his own faults. To Chris, it's always someone else's responsibility. Mr. Anderson sighed deeply. Talking to him is pointless. President Jack, he must be held accountable. We should decide on his punishment at the next board meeting. Yes, that's a good idea. Right after Chris apologized. I'm so sorry. I'll make sure this never happens again and will speak to everyone about it, please. Don't punish me. Even if you stay, you won't change. That's evident from your past behavior. Accept it. Chris was left stunned and defeated. President Jack, you must be exhausted on your first day. This will change the atmosphere in the company and naturally restore everyone's motivation. I never expected such a situation on my first day as president. But in the end, it was for the best for everyone and the company. Mr. Anderson spoke with satisfaction. But one thing still bothered me. Why me? Why, you ask? There must have been others more suitable for the role of president than me. So why? Mr. Anderson narrowed his white-haired eyebrows. We had decided to welcome you as president for a long time. It was my wife's strong wish. Your wife's? Mr. Anderson began to speak slowly about the past. It was about 50 years ago. At that time, newlywed Mr. Anderson was running around to start a company, and at the age of 20, he established Sons Corporation. With a small team, they gradually expanded the company, increasing staff with new graduates and mid-career hires, and 30 years later, it had grown into a company with over 500 employees. They had set up headquarters in the city and were about to develop further when it happened. My wife had always been physically weak. She couldn't go out, let alone work. I see. But what did your wife do when you started the company? I was always by her side. Mr. Anderson worked as the president while always being by his wife's side. Since establishing Sons Corporation, I left all on-site work to other employees and worked from home. So, although I am the president, I've never shown my face at the company. Only a few top executives know what I look like. No wonder I had never seen him before. I had heard there was a president, but I had never seen his face since I joined the company. People around called me the ghost president. Mr. Anderson laughed as he spoke, but his eyes looked lonely. It was just when we were about to expand. My wife's health worsened. When I turned 50, my wife passed away. The sorrow of losing his wife led Mr. Anderson to overwork himself. And eventually, the strain took its toll on his body. Even working from home, my body couldn't handle the stress. He cut back on sleep and handled all the work by himself. The burden was immense. Mr. Anderson shared these memories slowly. After losing my wife, my body and mind were not in good shape. I should have known that pushing myself would only make things worse. It's pathetic. In that case, shouldn't you have appointed someone else as president earlier? Why wait until now? Mr. Anderson began to explain why he chose me as the president. It all started when I told my wife about you before she passed away. At that time, I had just graduated high school and wanted to work instead of going to college. I was never interested in academics and was eager to start working. Then I heard about a job fair by Sons Corporation, a popular real estate company, and immediately applied. The person in charge explained everything very clearly and thoroughly. I felt that the company had a bright future, and so did my own future if I worked there. I decided on the spot that I would work for this company. I submitted my resume that day and passed the interview. Since then, I've dedicated myself to this company. Mr. Anderson heard about this from other senior executives and became interested. At the time, you were only 20, but your diligent attitude and ability to harmonize with others stood out. I found myself genuinely impressed by you. I never knew I was so highly regarded. But it was my wife's comment that solidified my decision to make you president. When I told her about you, she smiled and said you would be a perfect fit for the next president. Seeing her smile, I realized she was right, and I made up my mind. Is that so? So, please don't say you're not suitable. You are undoubtedly the right person to be president. I feel a renewed sense of responsibility. Just as I finished speaking and invited Mr. Anderson to go, I heard a faint voice from behind. You'll pay for this. When I quickly turned around, Chris, who had been silent until now, was charging at me with a furious expression. You! Chris's scream echoed loudly in the lobby. But in the next moment, no! Chris was tackled to the floor by a nearby security guard. Even then, Chris kept shouting, "Let go!" I slowly approached him and grabbed his face firmly. Enough already. My voice echoed through the lobby. Do you know how many people wanted to quit the company since you arrived? Every time, I convinced them to stay. If I hadn't, you'd be the only one left in the sales department by now, and you could have destroyed the company's future too. Seeing me furious for the first time, Chris was completely deflated. Everything I said is true. You caused a decline in sales, and you will be held accountable. Chris, looking devastated, was led away by the security guards, who held him by the arms. Chris was taken away by the security guards, severely reprimanded, and then released. The next day, after discussions with the top executives, Chris was fired due to his past behavior and significant drop in profits. Mr. Anderson informed me that Chris, unable to find a job, is now living on the streets. Despite earning so much, he has no savings and scavenges food from restaurant trash cans to survive. With his high pride, Chris is unlikely to succeed in any future job. Regardless, a bright future does not seem possible for Chris. As for me, since becoming president, my days have been busier than ever. Although my days are filled with work, this busy lifestyle is perfect for someone like me, whose hobby is work. Of course, there are many things I don't understand, and sometimes I feel lost, but there's always someone reliable to help. President, you seem tired. Is there something troubling you? It's a very special person's birthday today, and I don't know which place to book. Do you have any recommendations? In that case, how about the small park near the company? It would be a perfect place for some nostalgic conversations. Let's go with that. We'll reminisce about old times. Celebrating a birthday in a small park. I want to cherish this relationship moving forward.
Looking back now, I should have seen the signs. But when you're in love, your heart has a way of glossing over the red flags your mind tries to wave at you. I'm Rose, and this is the story of how I met my husband and his family. David and I both worked at TechCore Solutions as software developers. He caught my eye right away, not just because he was handsome, but because he had this quiet confidence about him. Unlike some of our colleagues who lived and breathed code, David could actually hold a conversation about other things. "Hey, did you catch the new episode of Black Mirror last night?" he asked one morning, stopping by my desk with 2 cups of coffee. That was how it started, simple conversations about shared interests that grew into something more. We discovered we both loved sci-fi shows, hiking on weekends, and had the same terrible taste in B-movies. Our lunch breaks got longer, and our after-work quick coffees turned into dinner dates. Before I knew it, a year had passed, and David wanted me to meet his family. "They're really down to earth," he assured me as we drove to his mother's house. "Mom's excited to meet you, and my sister Sarah lives there too, with her husband Mike and their son Tommy." The house was modest but well kept, with toys scattered across the front yard. Sarah opened the door before we could knock, bouncing her 4-year-old on her hip. "Finally," she exclaimed, pulling David into a hug. "Mom, they're here." Linda, David's mother, appeared from the kitchen wearing an apron and a warm smile. "There's my successful son," she beamed, hugging him tight before turning to me. "And this must be Rose. David's told us so much about you." During dinner, I watched how they interacted. They seemed like a normal family, clearly proud of David's achievements at work. But something felt off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it until Sarah started talking about Tommy's upcoming birthday. "David," she said, giving him her best puppy dog eyes, "Tommy's been begging for that new Nintendo game." "The one with the dinosaurs?" "Sarah," David started, but his mother jumped in. "Oh, let him spoil his nephew a little. You're doing so well at that fancy tech company," Linda laughed, patting David's hand. Then she turned to me with what seemed like a light-hearted smile. "I just hope after the wedding, he won't forget he has a mother and sister to take care of too." I smiled politely, thinking she was joking. Everyone laughed, and the conversation moved on. I didn't realize then that her words weren't actually a joke at all. 6 months later, David and I got married in a small ceremony. We found a nice apartment for rent near our office, and I thought we were starting our life together perfectly. The honeymoon phase of our marriage didn't last long, literally. We'd barely unpacked our suitcases from our actual honeymoon when the requests started rolling in. First, it was Sarah calling about Tommy's school supplies. Then Linda needed help with some home repairs. The requests were endless, and each time, David would pull out his wallet without hesitation. At first, I tried to ignore it. The amounts weren't huge, and David made good money at TechCore. But it started to feel like death by 1,000 cuts, $100 here, $200 there. Every week brought a new emergency that only David could solve. One night, after Sarah called about needing money for Tommy's new winter clothes, I decided it was time for a conversation. I waited until David and I were doing the dishes together, our nightly routine. "Hun," I started, carefully choosing my words, "can we talk about something?" He looked at me, soap suds up to his elbows. "Sure, what's up?" "It's about the money, for your family." I saw his shoulders tense slightly. "Don't you think it's becoming a bit excessive?" David's face flushed with embarrassment as he dried his hands. I know. I'm just used to helping them out. I've been doing it since I got my first job." "But your mom has a good pension," I pointed out gently. "And Sarah has Mike, shouldn't he be providing for his own family?" David let out a long sigh and leaned against the counter. "Mike, well, he hasn't actually worked in over a year." "What?" I nearly dropped the plate I was drying. "Why not?" "He keeps quitting. Every job he gets, there's always something wrong. The work is too hard, the boss is unreasonable, the commute is too long." David ran his fingers through his hair in frustration. "There's always an excuse." I set down the dish towel and turned to face my husband. "David, I love how much you care about your family. But we need to think about our future too. We want to buy a house someday, right? Have our own children?" "Of course," he nodded. "Then we need to start prioritizing our own family," I said softly, taking his hand. "Supporting your mom and sister is kind, but we can't keep doing it at the expense of our own dreams." David was quiet for a long moment, absently playing with my fingers. Finally, he looked up. "You're right. We should be saving for our future. What if we set up a separate savings account specifically for the house? We can put a fixed amount in there every month, no touching it for any reason." "That sounds perfect," I smiled, relieved he understood. We spent the rest of the evening planning our savings strategy, and for the first time since our wedding, I felt like we were truly on the same page about our future. 2 months into our new savings plan, Linda invited us over for Sunday dinner. I had a nagging feeling about it, but David insisted we should go. "They're still family," he said, squeezing my hand as we drove over. The tension was palpable from the moment we walked in. Sarah was setting the table, her movements sharp and angry. Mike was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. Linda's smile seemed forced as she hugged David, barely acknowledging my presence. The first 20 minutes of dinner were filled with awkward small talk about the weather and Linda's garden. I pushed my meatloaf around the plate, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It didn't take long. "David, honey," Linda began, her voice dripping with sweetness, "I noticed you haven't sent any money for the past 2 months. Is everything okay at work?" The clinking of forks against plates stopped. I could feel everyone's eyes on us. David cleared his throat, and I saw him straighten his shoulders, something he always did when he was nervous. "Actually, Mom," he said, his voice steady but quiet, "Rose and I are saving up to buy a house. We want to start our own family soon." The silence that followed was deafening. Linda's fork clattered against her plate as she set it down, her eyes boring into me. Sarah's face turned red, and I could see the storm brewing. "A house?" Sarah's voice cracked. "While I'm here pregnant with my second child, barely able to afford prenatal vitamins? Do you know how expensive baby things are these days?" I felt my blood begin to boil. 2 months of biting my tongue, and I couldn't hold back anymore. "Maybe your husband should think about that," I said, nodding toward Mike, who was still somehow managing to check his phone under the table. Sarah's face crumpled. "How dare you? You're so cruel." The tears started flowing, right on cue. "You don't understand our situation." Mike finally looked up from his phone. Hey, I'm trying here. Do you know how hard it is to find a good job in this economy? I'm dealing with depression, you know. Something in me snapped. Depression didn't stop you from having another baby, did it? The room exploded. Sarah wailed louder. Mike started defending himself about his job search, but Linda's voice rose above them all. You, she pointed her finger at me, face contorted with rage. You're trying to turn my son against his own family. We were happy before you came along with your selfish ideas. Selfish? I stood up so quickly, my chair scraped against the floor. Wanting to build a future with my husband is selfish? Mom, stop, David tried to interrupt, but Linda was on a roll. She's poisoning your mind against us. Your own mother and sister. How dare she tell us we can't have help from our own family? I couldn't take any more. Without a word, I grabbed my purse and walked out. David followed close behind, and we got into the car in silence. The sound of Linda's shout still echoed from the house as we pulled away. The drive home was painfully quiet. I watched the streetlights flash by, fighting back tears of frustration. Finally, as we pulled into our apartment complex, David spoke. You were right, he said softly. About everything. But maybe we need to be more gentle with them. They're not going to change overnight. I turned to look at him, saw the conflict written all over his face. Part of me wanted to argue that his family didn't deserve gentleness, that they needed a reality check. But looking at my husband's pained expression, I just nodded. The aftermath of our dinner confrontation played out in the most modern way possible, on social media. Sarah began posting daily updates that made my blood boil. Struggling to afford prenatal vitamins for my baby. Pregnant and broke, family struggle, one post read. Another showed an empty shopping cart, having to cut back on groceries this month. Sometimes I wonder how we'll manage with another little one on the way. The posts kept coming, each one more dramatic than the last. Pictures of Tommy looking sad beside empty toy store windows, long paragraphs about the importance of family support, pointed comments about some people having their priorities wrong. I caught David checking his phone constantly, his face getting more strained with each notification. One evening, after he'd been particularly quiet, I found him staring at a photo Sarah had posted of Tommy's worn-out shoes. You can send her something, I said softly, touching his shoulder. Small amounts. Just, let's keep our savings plan intact. The relief on his face was immediate. So David started sending Sarah a modest monthly amount again. Like magic, the tragic social media posts decreased, though they never completely stopped. Linda began extending dinner invitations once more, though the atmosphere was far from warm. Would you like more potatoes, David? Linda would ask warmly, then slide her eyes past me as if I were invisible. Sarah would only address her brother, speaking about me in the third person even when I sat right there. I wonder if your wife would mind passing the salt, she'd say, staring at the ceiling. I took it all in stride. Because while they were busy giving me the cold shoulder, something amazing was happening at work. TechCore landed a massive contract with Global Tech, one of the biggest names in the industry. David and I had both been instrumental in securing the deal, and our compensation reflected that. Suddenly, our combined income nearly doubled. Our savings account grew faster than we'd ever dreamed possible. We kept living modestly, but allowed ourselves a few luxuries, a new hybrid SUV to replace David's struggling sedan, a weekend trip to the coast here and there. As our bank account grew, so did our dreams. We started looking at real estate listings, discussing neighborhoods, planning for our future. For the first time since our wedding, I felt like we were truly moving forward. It was during one of our now tense family dinners that Linda dropped her latest bomb. I was quietly eating my pot roast, trying to ignore the usual cold shoulders, when she cleared her throat dramatically. I saw your vacation photos on Facebook, she announced, fixing me with an icy stare. Palm Springs, wasn't it? That resort looked expensive. I felt David tense beside me. Here we go again, I thought. Those infinity pools, luxury spa treatments, Linda continued, her voice dripping with disapproval. Really, David, I don't think it's appropriate to flaunt such a luxurious lifestyle when your sister can barely make ends meet with 2 children. The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. As she spoke, the clicking of computer keys provided a steady background rhythm. Mike sat at the desk in the corner, completely absorbed in his newest video game, the 3rd new release he'd bought this month, by my count. I couldn't help myself. Speaking of making ends meet, I said, gesturing toward Mike, there are plenty of job openings in tech support at our company. The pay is good, and the benefits are excellent. The clicking stopped for a moment, then resumed even louder. Sarah's face turned that familiar shade of red. You have no idea what it's like, she snapped. Try being a mother of 2 before you judge us. Oh wait, you wouldn't know anything about that, would you? The barb stung, but I kept my face neutral. Mike continued playing his game, apparently oblivious to the tension in the room. Or maybe he just didn't care. I could have pointed out that being a mother was Sarah's choice, just like having a second child while unemployed was their choice. I could have mentioned that the cost of Mike's gaming habit could probably cover those prenatal vitamins she was always complaining about on Facebook. I could have started another fight. Instead, I just shook my head and took another bite of pot roast. Later that night, as David and I drove home, I thought about the monthly transfers he still made to his sister's account. The amount wasn't small, it could have furnished an entire room in our future house, but our new salaries meant we could handle it without derailing our plans. Sometimes keeping the peace came with a price tag, and for now, we could afford it. Meanwhile, Sarah's demands evolved from subtle hints to full-blown gift registries. Every holiday, Christmas, Easter, birthdays, Mother's Day, yes, she expected gifts from her brother for Mother's Day, came with a detailed list of expensive items she needed for herself and the kids. David, look at this, I said one evening, showing him the latest email from his sister. It was a Christmas list that included designer clothes, the latest iPad, and premium toys that cost more than our monthly car payment. David sighed, running his hands through his hair. I'll talk to her. This is getting ridiculous. But when he called Sarah to explain that he was already helping with monthly support, the waterworks started immediately. I could hear her shrill voice through the phone, I'll tell Mom. You care more about your wife's feelings than your own family's needs. After watching David struggle through 3 such conversations, I'd had enough. While he was in the shower one evening, I opened Sarah's latest gift requirements email and started editing. The $800 designer purse became a $400 alternative. The $1,000 iPad became a $500 tablet. Every item, cut exactly in half. Here, I said, showing David my revised list. This is what we're doing. He looked uncertain. Sarah won't be happy. Sarah's never happy, I pointed out. But this is still generous. When the gifts were delivered, the reaction was exactly what I expected. Sarah called David in tears, and Linda left a scathing voicemail about cheap knockoffs. At the next family dinner, they both shot daggers at me with their eyes. I just don't understand why you couldn't get the items I specifically requested, Sarah sniffed. I gave her my sweetest smile. Oh, but didn't you know? It's not about the price tag, it's the thought that counts. We put a lot of thought into choosing these alternatives. The look she gave me could have curdled milk. A year passed in this strange dance of passive-aggressive gift-giving and tense family dinners. Then came the Easter gathering that would change everything. Sarah waited until everyone was seated at the table, then stood up with what she clearly thought was a radiant expression. I have wonderful news, she announced. We're expecting baby number 3. The fork stopped halfway to my mouth. I felt David stiffen beside me. A 3rd child? With no income? No home of their own? My mind spun with calculations of how much more this would add to our monthly family support payments. Mike, predictably, didn't look up from his phone. Linda, however, was ecstatic. Oh, my darling, she cried, hugging Sarah. This is wonderful news. 3 beautiful grandchildren. Then she turned to me, her eyes glittering with malice. You should take notes, Rose. Sarah's such a wonderful example of a real woman. Here she is, about to have her 3rd child, while you still haven't given David any. The room went quiet. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. I set down my fork carefully, making sure my voice was steady when I spoke. I believe in doing things in the right order, I said coolly. First, build a stable foundation, like having our own home and being able to provide for our children without depending on handouts. Then, start a family. Linda and Sarah exchanged looks, before breaking into artificial laughter. Oh, Rose, Linda said condescendingly, you're so corporate. Family isn't about money and houses. No, I agreed, taking a sip of water. It's about responsibility. The tension around the table was thick enough to cut with a knife, but I didn't care anymore. Let them laugh. Let them think I was cold and calculating. At least my future children would have a roof over their heads that nobody could take away. Sarah's 3rd baby arrived in September, another boy. Meanwhile, David and I had reached our savings goal. After months of house hunting, we finally found it, our perfect home. A beautiful 2-story colonial with 4 bedrooms, a spacious backyard, and a kitchen that made me want to learn to cook properly. It was in an excellent school district, just a 20-minute drive from work. We spent weeks planning renovations, picking paint colors, and choosing furniture. Every room held a promise: the sunny bedroom that would make a perfect nursery, the basement we could turn into a playroom, the office space where we could work from home when needed. Then came the dinner invitation from Linda. Mom wants us to come over tonight, David said, checking his phone. She says it's important. Something felt off about the invitation, but I couldn't put my finger on what. When we arrived, everyone was there: Linda, Sarah, Mike, and all 3 kids. They had this strange, almost smug energy about them. Sarah was practically bouncing in her seat, while Linda wore the self-satisfied smile I'd learned to dread. So, Linda began after we'd settled in, I hear congratulations are in order. You bought a house? I nodded, still riding the high of our achievement. Yes, we just closed last week. It's perfect for. Well, Linda cut me off, that's actually what we wanted to discuss. She folded her hands on the table, like a business executive about to close a deal. You and David are still young, no children yet. You can continue living in your apartment just fine. I felt my smile freeze. What was she getting at? But Sarah, my poor girl, has 3 beautiful children, cramped up in this house. They need space to grow, a yard to play in. Linda's voice dripped with false concern. So, we've decided that you should give your new house to Sarah and her family. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. But Linda's face remained serious. Sarah was nodding enthusiastically, while Mike finally looked up from his phone, showing interest for the first time in months. I'm sorry, what? I managed to say, looking between them. You want us to give away our house? The house we spent years saving for? Sarah leaned forward. I'm a mother of 3, she said, as if that explained everything. I have a right to provide my children with proper living conditions. You can always buy another house later. I turned to David, my heart pounding. Are you hearing this? Do you finally see how entitled they are? But before David could respond, Linda's smile widened. Oh, sweetie, she said, her voice sickly sweet. I raised my son right. He knows where his loyalties lie, with his mother and sister. Isn't that right, David? Bang! David's fist came down on the table so hard the dishes rattled. He shot up from his chair, his face flushed with anger I'd never seen before. Linda and Sarah actually flinched, their smug expressions dissolving into shock. That's enough, David's voice boomed through the room. Even Mike dropped his phone. I have sat here for years watching you manipulate and guilt me. I've supported you financially, emotionally, constantly. I've given you money while you, he pointed at Mike, sit around playing video games all day. I've listened to you insult my wife, belittle our choices, and demand more and more. Sarah opened her mouth to speak, but David cut her off. No, you don't get to talk right now. Do you have any idea how much money I've given you over the years? Thousands upon thousands of dollars. And now you have the audacity to demand our house? Linda tried to interject. David, sweetie. Don't sweetie me, Mom. You think you raised me right? Teaching me that it's okay to leech off relatives? That it's acceptable to demand they give up their home? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know what? You actually did raise me right enough to finally see how toxic this all is. He grabbed my hand, pulling me up from my chair. We're done. All of this? It's over. No more money, no more gifts, no more manipulation. Find someone else to be your ATM. But the children, Sarah started crying. Should be your and Mike's responsibility, David shouted. Not mine, not Rose's. Yours. Still holding my hand, he pulled me toward the door. Don't call us. Don't text us. Don't send us your lists of demands. We're done. The last thing I saw as we left was their stunned faces, frozen in disbelief. David practically ran to the car, helping me in before jumping into the driver's seat. As we pulled away from the curb, I couldn't help myself. I grabbed his face and kissed him hard. I love you, I whispered against his lips. I'm so proud of you. He hugged me tight, and I felt him trembling slightly. I should have done that years ago. I'm sorry it took me so long to stand up to them. The next few weeks were a hurricane of desperate attempts at contact. Linda called constantly, alternating between tears and threats. Sarah sent lengthy texts about how we were destroying her family. Flying monkeys, in the form of distant relatives, called to tell us how cruel we were being. But David stood firm. He blocked their numbers, unfriended them on social media, and we focused on making our new house a home. We painted walls, bought furniture, and started planting a garden. Each day that passed, I watched the weight of his family's manipulation lift from his shoulders. One morning, as we sat in our beautiful kitchen, drinking coffee and planning to convert one of the bedrooms into a nursery, David reached across the table and took my hand. Thank you, he said simply. For helping me find my spine. For showing me what real family should be like. For being patient while I figured it all out. As I write this, sitting in our cozy living room, I can't help but smile. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you deserve. Sometimes you have to build your own. And that's exactly what we're doing, one day, one room, one dream at a time. The nursery paint samples are spread out on the coffee table in front of me, and tomorrow we have our first appointment with the fertility specialist. Life isn't perfect, but it's ours. And that's all that matters.